Hey everybody, this is Cam Garrity. Welcome back to This Should Have Been a Phone Call. Today on the show we have one of my very good friends and a tremendous podcaster, DJ Bob Runkel. For 11 years he has been the host of the DJ Bob Show, which you can hear wherever you get your podcasts. He's had some really big guests on in that time, from one of the co-creators of How I Met Your Mother to Dela Cruz, who has starred in Broadway's Aladdin and is presently the human lead on Nick Jr.'s Blue's Clues and You. Bob is a tremendous font of knowledge when it comes to pop culture, past and present. It's been a huge focus of his show, but he also uses his show as a platform to advocate for disability representation in pop culture and in our media. I've been lucky enough to be a guest on his show on two different occasions, so I was really excited to turn the tables and talk to Bob about his life, not only as a podcaster and a pop culture enthusiast, but also go deep into his life with cerebral palsy and how that shapes his worldview as well. This should have been a phone call with my podcast hero, Bob Runkel. I'm glad you're here, Bob.
Me too.
For anybody who doesn't know you or doesn't know the DJ Bob Show, I'd love to talk about that a little bit. And if I know you, you're sitting on a bunch of episodes right now.
Yeah.
What are some of the ones you're most excited for people to hear?
Yeah, I've got a bunch of great content coming out, and ones that you can look out for are the creators of Recess, and what's cool about them is that they helped pioneer Rugrats, and they worked at Classy Shubo for years before they moved on to Disney, so that's a 2-hour conversation raw that will without a doubt need to be whittled down.
Your poor editor Nate Beagle.
But at least I warn him. At least I tell him, like, hey, it's gonna be a long one.
That's true. And I suppose for listeners, we'll shatter the illusion early. Bob and I are talking right now. It's August 29th when we're doing this. So by the time they're hearing this sometime in January, I suppose most of these episodes will actually be out.
Most of them. Yeah. Although, I shit on them for like a while, but I'm really trying to get these out because you've heard some of who we've had on, and they're meaningful. They're just good conversations that I want to get out into the world. So the quicker, the better.
For sure. And something I really admire, and I don't know how much of it is intentional or somewhat dumb luck maybe, but the timeliness of your guest bookings recently has been pretty wild. I just think about, like,
I always try to do that.
Yeah. I mean, and then sometimes you just, like, you'll luck out too, right? I mean, it's kind of a lovely 50-50.
With the whole thing, I guess I'll go in a little bit behind the scenes. I don't know if that's...
Yeah, do it.
So, for Recess, that was a fluke thing because I hired a fan of the show who had been listening to me for years to help me coordinate, emails. And cause, fun fact, I only type with one finger. I don't know if you knew that. But, that's a lot of emails, and that's a lot of stuff to do. So, I brought somebody in, and I said, you're an animation enthusiast. Who do you know? He said, well, I can get you Paul Germain, one of the people behind Rugrats and Recess. And I'm like, yeah, okay, that'd be great. So then
go do that.
So then we hop on a Zoom call with Paul, And he's like, well, if you're going to do something about Recess, you have to get Joe, too, because it's Paul and Joe Productions who produced it. And within, I would say, 15 minutes, we nailed them down for a time together. And that was lots of fun.
Oh, absolutely. And I realized I was just making light of, or leaning in on how much there's a bit of dumb luck. But I mean, you really know your stuff in terms of what anniversaries are coming up. And I know you play that long game of, Rugrats is about to turn 30. Let me try to, and the reboot's coming out. So let me try to reach out to Nickelodeon and make it happen. So I didn't want to, make it seem like it was all dumb luck.
But sometimes it is dumb luck because I didn't know that Recess was celebrating an anniversary until after I booked it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, well, okay then.
Right.
Because also, if you always do it on the anniversary of something, that's predictable.
Well, then you're also overlapping because there's so many podcasts out there that, you don't want to do it at a time where, everybody has the same 3 or 4 guests on too. I love when sometimes I'll pull up my podcast feed and the same guest is on like 3 or 4 different podcasts that I listen to. And I'm like, could you guys coordinate this like 10% better?
So that's something I wanted to bring up too. Like, I'm smart about that. Like, let's say I hear a guest on a podcast. I book them, or I try to book them right after I hear them, but the episode won't come out until 2 months later, where it's not in the person's brain.
Right.
Like, they're not thinking about a podcast they heard 2 months ago. Maybe I am, but like I try to keep it respectful. Like, even with your other podcast that you do, Puppeteers, it's like I always call you and I'm like, can I do that? Like, there not much more.
I love that episode with Jim Krupa. Can you could I do him next?
Like, but if anything, it shows you how much I enjoy the guests that I want to have them on. Yes. It's not like it's never like, oh, I'm gonna be Cam and Adam today, or
No, of course. Well, and the other thing too, which is something that I so admire about the DJ Bob show, is that you pull out information from the guests that, like, it's the only you would ask those things, and in some ways only you would want to know about them, but hearing them and hearing you talk about it is so great. I think about your Stephanie DeBruzzo episodes that you did at the beginning of this year. I just love because, for people who don't know, Stephanie is an amazing puppeteer and actress, is known for Avenue Q and Sesame Street and all these things. And you talked very little about puppetry with her. I mean, you guys were you're talking about Schoolhouse Rock and her favorite songs and all those things. And I love that about your show. Because you're not only getting guests who are celebrated members of nostalgia and pop culture history, but you're getting them to talk about the pop culture that they love too, which I think is really cool.
And cause that was something in her bio that she just sort of glanced over. Like, in any interview, like, no one talks about it. So I'm like, well, I'm the guy that has the Schoolhouse Rock music box set in the loose leaf binder packaging. Like, they did this big thing for the 30th anniversary, and I'm like a big fan. Like, if you go back in my other archives, I talked to the creator of those shorts. So that was such a big part of my life. And I couldn't not talk about it once I found out that she was a fan of it too.
Yeah, when you find those things, when you lock in with people, like you can't not talk about those things. Which is actually this is part of my how have you been round that it's a good preamble to the weird question round. But I wanted to ask you, Bob, spot or blue?
Oh my God, really? Well, I gotta be honest.
I know they both hold a great place in both of our hearts. Spot the dog, or Blue from Blue's Clues.
Okay, well, Blue lasted longer. Blue had a longer shelf life. You know, like a longer time in my life.
Okay.
As opposed to Spot having like 3 or 4 videos or whatever it was. But I gotta say Blue, because it's important to the show, whether I want it to be or not, you know?
Right.
Like,
Important to the DJ Bob show, you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's fair. That's fair. And I think too, I mean, because you're my sister's age, she was like perfect in the bullseye of the Blue's Clues generation. So, I mean, that just viscerally must be like a connected part to your childhood.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because now one of the interviews that I'm really proudest of is my Josh Dela Cruz interview with the new host of the new show, because we got stuff out of him that he wasn't being asked.
No, I love that. I love that interview. He's wonderful, and I think it's another shining example of how the DJ Bob show can really pull excellent stuff from your guests because of how much you respect them and their work.
Because I hate interviews where it's like you can almost see the next question from a mile away.
The next kind of part of this is just some weird questions to, hopefully prompt some quirky, maybe insightful responses, a little bit of a slow round to get you marinating.
Have you met me?
All right, let's dive into it. What fictional character do you most empathize with?
Now, that's a hard concept to even think about. But the one person I was thinking about, and this probably won't be a shock to you, but Arthur.
Why is that?
All he wants to do is just have a group of friends, and, there's always some hijinks. His pesky little sister bugging his ass every damn episode. And you just feel for him. And then you root for him when he succeeds and when he tells, it's basically like a Clarissa Explains It All situation in an animation. He's just telling you his story. And from that cold open on, you feel for him.
I love that.
And even in the book, too.
I don't know that I've ever read an Arthur book. I used to watch the show as a kid, and I remember seeing them at the library and stuff, but I don't know, I guess there was just other things that captured my imagination. I never really got super into the Arthur books.
They were interesting because if you look at the early books, because the book started, I think, in the mid-70s.
And the anime, or the illustration in that was, so different from what we know now.
I was going to say that, yeah. I don't know if you'd seen that. That's such a drastic change.
Yeah, he looked much more like
an artwork.
I always, and I'm sure you'll appreciate this too. I love like OG versions of classic characters. Like to me, the Barney when they were still like producing that show in Sandy Duncan's garage in Texas. Like I love that darker version of him so much better than what people know
what we know,
him as. Yeah, and like same with like I love that version of Arthur. I'm looking at a picture of an original orange Oscar here in my office, and yeah, there's something about like the first versions of things that I find really endearing. So you're given the magic mirror from Beauty and the Beast, a window to literally anything in the world. What do you ask it to show you?
I asked it to show me, hey, will I ever get paid finally for doing this stuff?
Okay, that's a decent answer. I should have clarified. So it's just a window to the present day world. So it literally just shows you anything that's happening right now. What do you ask that to show you?
I just wanted to show me how happy I am doing this despite my limitations.
So you just want to show it. You just want a mirror.
Yeah. Like, even if, like, I've been going through hell and back recently, and it's like, this show and doing the interview back to back to, like, I'm not doing them like crazy, but just keeping myself busy is helping me cope with things throughout my life right now.
One other weird question, and whether or not we keep it in here or not, we'll see. And you already told me that this could be a whole episode into itself. But what's a technology you had growing up as a kid that you either missed the most or you're most nostalgic for?
Now, I don't know if this is a technology per se, but to a degree it still exists depending on who you ask. I miss the concept of a CD single. Like, collecting those were everything to me. Like, one, they were really cheap, and for some reason my mom wouldn't let me buy full albums yet. So, like,
yeah.
So, just going into, like, Sam Goody or FYE or one of those places, I just love the idea of that. An honorable mention that, can I do a couple?
Yeah, go ahead. Dish 'em.
Let's see. An honorable mention would be the Video Now console.
Video Now. Was that like a hit clip? Kind of?
It was like a DVD player, but they had their own sort of like, they used to call it a PVD, like a personal video disc.
Okay.
And like they would have all these Nickelodeon shows on there, and like The Amazing Race, and
got it. Okay, hold on. Let me look at this up.
And they also, what is that show? They had Fear Factor ones. Like, it was so weird.
A Video
But
Now?
then, yeah.
You said video. Oh, I remember these. Oh, okay. I'm looking at them right now.
And the cool thing is, after a while, they came out with an extension that you could put in your CD drive, and you could make your own Video Now dish for your viewing. It was cool. They had so many weird things that they marketed towards kids. Like, another thing was the hit clip. Like, who thought that 20 seconds of an NSYNC song on a little...
It's just the iTunes, like, when you go into iTunes and you just listen to the preview, those are longer. Those are longer than a hit clip.
And one other one, because I know you and I both had it.
Oh no!
The radio DJ transmitter from Wild Planet.
Yes. Was that what got you into just like being a DJ?
Yes, and that has a funny full circle story that I don't even know if I told you.
Okay. Well, just for anyone who doesn't know, the DJ Now piece, it was a toy from a company that made like night vision goggles and like a thing that you could hear conversations from.
Yeah, Wild Planet, I think the company.
Wild Planet, that's right. And they had a thing where basically you could broadcast, within, it was not far, like 50 feet of a radio, an AM radio.
But to a kid who wanted to be a DJ, that was everything.
Big time. And there was a cassette player in it, so you could like play your own music, and it was anything with a microphone back then.
I really wish it had a CD player in it, but
yeah, but I mean, like, that's how old that thing was, that it didn't.
But even then, cassettes were sort of outdated. Yeah. But I digress.
So what's your story with it?
So the story, this will blow your mind. So the story is, the first time I saw that toy, I was watching Double Dare 2000 on Nickelodeon, and the commercial came on. And when you're a kid, you call your mother, Mom, I want this for Christmas. Because I had been collecting CDs and, air quotes, DJing family parties for a year. Like, I was like 2 years at the point. I started DJing parties at like 4. Naturally. I don't know whether that was good or not, but and
people humored you.
So I saw the commercial, and I get it that Christmas, and I'm playing with it, and then like decades go by, and I become friends with Chris Phillips. And if you don't know who Chris Phillips is, he's the voice of Face from Nick Jr. He was on PB&J Otter, all these shows. Turns out he was the ad voice in that radio DJ spot.
Of course he was.
And I was like, and then years later, he ends up recording promos because he was our promo voice for years.
Wow. For
the DJ Bob show. And I'm like, what is my life right now? Like, it's your fault that I'm doing this,
God, like, that really is full circle.
Yeah. I mean, of course, later, DJ Rick Adams and BB Good had a bigger impact on me, but
sure.
Anybody to plant the seed, I'm thankful for.
So getting into how are you really, which is maybe the scary section of the show, but
boy.
No, this, people who don't know, you and I, we talk really regularly, like at least once or twice a week, and just catch up. As you always say, podcasters need to stick together, and we're always bouncing ideas off of each other.
I feel like the idea of podcasters sticking together, I feel like that is something that you were conscious of, but when I started telling you that, I feel like that's something you really latched onto when we first started talking. Is that true?
I would say so. I mean, for me, coming from puppetry, where so much of that is, you can't do it in a vacuum. Like, you just need a group of people around you to right hand, or, you build the puppets while I perform the thing, or, whatever it is. I just like having a team and having a cohort. So when we connected, I think I was, a year into Puppeteers or so. It was just so lovely to have someone who wasn't doing a puppetry podcast, but to be able to empathize and connect with just how to create something
And
like
I
this.
wasn't a fanboy about it. We just hung out. And
no, you were a fanboy of Noel McNeil, and just by extension you latched onto our show.
And the first thing I said to you was, I love your branding.
That's right.
Cut to years later, you're one of the parts in my operation.
Right.
We're working together on projects. I mean, super cool.
I was just gonna ask. I've heard you say, you've said to me, and you've said in other interviews, how much your love for pop culture came because, you were inside a lot, not being able to do things that maybe other kids your age were able to do because of your CP, your cerebral palsy. But before you had the DJ Bob show, like, how did you harness your knowledge and your love for that pop culture? Like, where did that energy go before you had a podcast to like channel it all into?
Well, before I had a podcast, I was doing live internet radio. I was on several radio stations. I even started a radio show on a live stream platform when I was 12, before people knew what it was. So the DJ Bob show was just, it was live at first too, and then at some point he said to me, look, the way your setup is, you can't commit to a weekly show for 4 hours. You can't do it. So why don't you start a podcast so it's at your timetable whenever you want? And 2 weeks later, Noel McNeil said the same thing too. Like, they all agreed. But before that, even before the live streaming stuff, I would just, like, one of my kind of go-tos was Radio KOL. And if you don't, you've learned a great deal about that show from talking to me.
Yeah, and I'll link a little bit to it in the show notes too.
This and Radio Disney were sort of my home away from home, because it was wacky. It was personality-driven radio, which is not very much a thing anymore. So when I hear that stuff, I said, I want to create. So that's how I really got into, I always thought about pop culture. It was always in me. Like, I'd be watching TV all the time. So, and then when I started doing a podcast and honestly taking it more seriously, then I started experimenting with those things. How can I take those things I heard, flip them on their head, and sort of make it my own?
How did you sort of schedule and balance all those things with, time for school, or, I don't know if you had to spend a lot of time with, doctors or anything, like, just what was the, I mean, because it really was like your part-time job. What was the work-life balance like for you?
The good thing about when the DJ Bob show started, I had just started my freshman year of high school, and everybody knew about it. Everybody loved it. Everybody wanted to be a part of it. And I remember
who's everybody?
Like teachers and staff. Like, everybody was just so, like, they have so, like, wow, we have this kid who is, I don't want to say an entrepreneur, but like someone who is creating something bigger.
Well, someone who's just creating something. You know, my mom's a teacher. I come from a family of teachers, and just to find someone who, you know, to find a student who's doing more than just clocking in and clocking out, you know, someone who knows what they're striving for is just so refreshing to see. So I'm sure for people to see you doing that was just a joy to observe.
Yeah, and to think, like, when I started high school, we were only 3 months into the show.
Because you started doing it during the summer, like during summer break.
Yeah, and a lot of people didn't hear those shows because, you know, they weren't recorded. They weren't available. So when school came, I told everybody about the show. I like, look at this show I'm doing, and I would burn CDs for teachers, and they would play them in class, and it was such like a support system that I never had.
Yeah.
I mean, my family's one thing, and nobody knew what a podcast was back. Like, it wasn't even a podcast. What it was me playing music and me talking in between songs. Like, one of my first interviews we did, and I can't believe I got this so early on. It was like the 36th anniversary of the holiday novelty song "Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer."
Oh gosh. Okay.
And I wrote the guy, Dr. Elmo Shropshire, that's his name, and he's actually he's still a veterinarian in his 80s. Good for him. But to think, like, because that, you can love and hate that song all you want, but that song was major for so many years. And to think, like, just a high school kid had the mindset to even go, I'm just going to contact this person. And I still carry that with me.
For sure. Well, yeah, it's that kind of thing of just knowing that you could connect with someone outside of your like home or life circle and kind of rope them in. I mean, I've felt the same way the first time I connected with someone from the Muppets. It was just like, oh my gosh, like this is achievable. Yeah, it's a really empowering feeling.
Yeah, and one of my favorite stories was, like, it only got bigger a year later because the staff knew that I was doing this radio show, and at some point they recommended that I visit this trade school called Bosch's, where, like, you learn a trade. And they put me in their audio production course. And once they found out that I was doing a show, I didn't do much of their assignments that they gave me, because what would happen is I would go to high school, I would go there in the morning for half the day, and then I'd be driven by bus to a recording studio to produce the show.
Oh my God. And so they're like tailoring their program around what you're already doing.
And I had access to all the equipment that I needed.
Wow. That's wild.
I could bring home microphones, and I could, use their setup and produce things, and I was getting graded for stuff that I did. I just remember them being so open and so willing to let me do whatever. To have that platform was super resourceful, and I'm so thankful for that.
You've obviously always dealt with the CP. you and I have talked about the fact that I've dealt with illness growing up, and for better or worse, for me, that stuff kind of presented itself when I was in middle school and in high school and college. So there was a different, level for me of like, I kind of had a way of doing things, and all of a sudden this illness has disrupted my life, and I've had to, accept that and rearrange and kind of adjust to how I lived life and did school and did all that sort of stuff. For you, what's that experience like of, because I'm sure for part of your upbringing, like that's just what you had to deal with. That's like, oh, that's just who I am. So,
oh my God, yes.
But so what's that process of realizing, oh, not everybody has this, and like, what's that process of observing that you have something that other people don't, of realizing, okay, this is how I'm going to deal with this, and accepting, moving on. And I imagine that process had to, like, you kept having to go through that process as you went through different stages of life, right?
Oh my goodness. Almost to the point where you couldn't have said it any better, because when I was diagnosed when I was 2 years old,
mm-hmm.
they automatically put me in a place called United Cerebral Palsy Children's Center for school. So that was people with CP were literally the only people I knew till I was 6 years old.
Oh my God.
So when
wow.
you're saying that, you could not be more right, So when I went to kindergarten in public school and I couldn't do whatever I wanted, I couldn't, like whenever there was a school dance at that other school, I could just bring my stuff and do whatever I wanted to do. But in public school, you can't do whatever you want.
No.
Back then, they let you do whatever you wanted to make you feel like you could do whatever you wanted.
Right. And there's also just a mindset, if you're at that center where, people have an understanding of even what CP is, because it's,
they all had it. Yeah.
Right. And, versus going to this other place where now you're just completely an outsider.
So when I went into kindergarten at this public school, it was just to put a timetable on it. My mom kept me back because she didn't think I was ready,
mm-hmm.
And I'm glad she did. But just for reference, I went into this version of kindergarten. I say it like that because the other school had a kindergarten program as well that I was also in. But as far as public school, I went into kindergarten when I really should have been going into first grade in September 2001.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, if that was about that time.
And what I remember...
And you're living in New York and on Long Island.
Yes. And what I remember about that day is that our school nurse's husband was in the towers. And she never came back after that day.
And did you have a relationship with, like, did you know her at that point?
Yeah, because so I would go in there and take medicine every day for that little less than a couple weeks, because she never came back. after that day. So that was such a weird day for me because even as a kid, because when most people were turning 6 that year, I remember celebrating my 7th birthday in kindergarten.
Yeah.
And even then, I'm like, wait, that's weird.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not bad, but it's... You understand what I'm getting at? Like, it's
No,
like,
I do. I mean, gosh, I remember, when you're that age, anything to make you different, kids are going to latch on to try to just, it's a defense mechanism, but just to make you feel different. So to have those added layers, and then what was, if you don't mind me asking, because I mean, you and we both live in New York State, but I'm as far away from New York City as possible. I was in 5th grade when 9/11 happened, and that day was my first time even hearing what the Twin Towers were. So like what was that like for you as a kid, just hearing about that, and like how does that recontextualize your outlook and just your day to day?
I remember asking what happened to my sisters, because my sisters were, let's see, 10 and 13, something like that.
Okay.
So they kind of had it was still uncertain to them, but of course they had more of a grasp than I did. And
Right.
all I remember is them saying, like, it's just bad people did this to the towers. But it didn't really hit me until a month later when, and I have this footage somewhere, they did a memorial, like a garden in memory of my nurse's husband, and reported it on the news. So every class in that school helped, like, grow this garden and plant these seeds. And I joke around, I say my claim to fame was that my foot was on TV in 2001. Like, but, like, that moment just, it was, I don't want to say it was the end of innocence, but, like, you could sense, even as a kid, like, things are different now in the home, in the school. And, to make matters worse, that school, I was only there for 1 year. I was only there for kindergarten, so by the time I made friends in kindergarten, I had to go to a whole other school for 1st grade.
Why was that?
Because it was more accessible, and because the other school didn't have an elevator.
Yeah.
I needed to go upstairs and stuff like that. So,
right.
But, you're making friends at one school, and now you have to say goodbye to them. And so it's this crazy kind of mix mash of memories that I have from that time period.
Well, so, all these different things are happening to you at a point where, like, a kid that age is just supposed to be enjoying life, and it's just trial after trial. What do you think allowed you to be able to persevere there instead of just like shutting down and becoming an asshole? Because like you're, I mean, you and I both deal with anxiety, but like otherwise, I mean, you've got a good head on your shoulders. And I just, so many other people could have gone through those things and just
And that's not to say that I didn't lash out or I didn't freak out, because I totally did.
No, sure. Of course, but I mean, you're on the other end of all those experiences and relatively in a good place and are, a good, kind, really funny person. Would you attribute it to the pop culture, or was it something else?
It's so funny that you bring that up. There was one moment in pop culture. I remember sitting with my mom on the couch, eating Carvel ice cream. You're from New York, you know what Carvel is. And watching the Rugrats 10th anniversary special, the one that led into the all grown up series. You remember? You know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah, they all go into the closet and it's a time machine thing. Yeah, okay.
And watching that with my mother really stuck with me. Like, I had then that year I had a Rocket Power lunchbox. So Nickelodeon, more so than Disney, meant the world to me as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember, seeing the first Jimmy Neutron movie in theaters that Christmas break and just loving it. And then getting to talk to Jimmy Neutron's dad almost 20 years later. So all of this stuff means the world to me. While most people see it as just something they viewed as a kid, I can pinpoint it to certain times.
So with the DJ Bob show, as you keep creating it, and the episodes are just so good. But for you as a host and you as a creator, like, what are you looking for? Like, are you just trying to, like, give these artists a platform? Do you see it as a way, like, sort of selfishly, like, for you to just meet your heroes? Are you proselytizing, like, to get people to love the thing? Like, what do you see as your mission in creating the DJ Bob show?
I guess my motive is to talk to these people about pop culture and self-indulgently talk about my life too.
Yeah.
Because this isn't about Rugrats. This is about Rugrats and how great it is and how it meant a lot to me. Like, I tell you all the time that people request me to do shows and movies.
Yeah.
And I don't do them because they don't mean as much.
They don't connect with you and that time of where you were at when it was being created in the first place.
Like, for example, if I could talk to somebody who started... This sounds ridiculous, but I think you'll get it. But if I could talk to somebody who started the Scholastic Book Fairs, I would talk to them.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Because that is a moment.
Yeah.
I can still remember the smell of the order form. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I absolutely do, Bob. Oh my gosh. And having your parents, like, cut the little slip on the back page of those things, of, like, letting your teacher know what books you want. Absolutely.
That's a whole vibe.
Right. It is.
Like, whenever I saw it coming, I'm like, oh, here we go.
Yep.
What are we going to get now? Strangely, that connects to the DJ Bob show in a way, too. This book called Take Me Out of the Bathtub, which was...
You were just telling me about this, yeah.
It's a very funny, like, crazy, like parody songs to children's songs that people know, like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, Stinky 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 Diaper Change, like the idea, like just real stupid stuff for kids. Stupid in a good way. So I wanted to find out who wrote it, and it turns out that the writer is a guy by the name of Alan Katz, who is a book writer for one, but he also contributed like 1,000 song parodies for the Rosie O'Donnell show in a 6-year run.
Right.
But it was so cool to tell him, like, I remember getting your book at the book fair, and it impacted me so much. And then, like, he was just asking me questions, like, just about life, and it was super rewarding to me. So, thank you, Scholastic Book Fairy, for that, if you're listening.
They have to be at this point. We'll send this to them. How has your opinion changed in terms of, you know, you've talked to me about wanting as a kid to, like, you wish you saw yourself more in the pop culture that you took in, like the moment of seeing someone in a wheelchair on Stanley and finally being able to be like, oh, that's someone like me. So like you've always had that want of like seeing more disability inclusion happen versus like actually using the DJ Bob show as a vehicle for advocating to see that happen. What
I'll tell you this. I never want the DJ Bob show to also be a disability inclusion podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a part of me, so I wedge it in. And I just want disability inclusion to be showcased in a way where it's like, oh, he's just part of the group. There's no billboard around it. It's just there.
Well, I mean, you're someone who you literally had to change schools because the place you went to kindergarten to didn't have an elevator. So like, of course, in the same way that like, oh, Scholastic Book Fair was a part of me, it's going to be a part of my show. Like, how could that advocacy not be a part of what you're creating as well, right?
I mean, advocacy, yes. But I never wanted to be like, you know, a sob story. Like, oh my gosh, like, I love your work so much. Like, it was such a... you know what I mean?
Right. Please be on my show because I watched you when I had CP as a child and you got me through it.
But at the same time, it's like, I do mention it in every interview request I do.
Yeah.
Because it creates a dialogue and people want to know more.
Right. It creates a dialogue and a point of view for your show without being the reason that the show exists or keeps moving on.
Because I never used to talk about it in the early days, and then I got more comfortable with it. I did an audio documentary, if that's a thing.
Yeah.
In 2013, I was in my senior year of high school, and I did a documentary about living with CP at that point.
Oh, wow. Is that around somewhere still for people to...
Yeah, that's... You need to listen to that. Like that,
yeah, I'd love to.
Because that is even eye-opening for me, even though I was the one that did it. It just,
yeah.
Because it's a different Bob. And I was so proud of it. And one of my favorite responses I got from it was from one of my dear friends who you know very well, Vicky Eibner, who played Ojo on Brenda the Glue House and a string of other characters.
Excellent puppeteer.
But she was like one of my first advocates, and said, you need to talk about this more. But I still never did. And then I started listening to other disability podcasts and meeting other people, and they taught me that me telling these stories to the creatives gives them a reason why they do what they do, so why not tell them?
Yeah.
They're not going to know unless I tell them.
No, but I mean, you talked about in your episode with the Recess creators. I haven't listened to it yet, but you've had an opportunity to call some of these creators out too on like why didn't you put this in your show? Why was it only in Stanley that I saw people who I could connect with?
And you know what? It's funny because I always bring up Stanley, one of my best friends. Like, we hang out in person. Is the art director for the series, and I called him out, and I said, "Dude, even the wheelchair you used back then was outdated."
Yes.
And he's like, I know. Stop reminding me. But I taught him something.
Yeah.
And that was super cool.
No, I that's so important. And I could say as a graphic designer, I a lot of times someone will say like, get me a photo of someone doing a chemistry experiment. And you show them a photo that you actually took in a chem lab of someone doing an experiment. And they say, well, this doesn't look like someone doing chemistry. And you go, but no, it is. And they're like, but no, they need to have the beakers with the colorful liquid and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, no, that's not what chemistry actually looks like. And I think, wheelchairs, for better or worse, are one of those things that people, they perceive in their head of the, the classic, older style wheelchair that they know from the cover of their Spanish textbook. But, they don't have a working concept of what a contemporary one actually looks and how it works.
I mean, and there are chairs that still look like that, but
sure,
one size doesn't fit all.
So what in your life right now do you think your past self would be proudest of or most excited for?
I could give you a generic answer and say the show, but I could say the show and how I'm not afraid to contact these people.
Yeah.
Something that my mother always says when she talks about the show to people, like, she always says, I don't know how he does it. And quite frankly, I don't either. Like, I bet you, and this is not for you to compliment me, but I bet you're amazed whenever I call you like, hey, I got this person. And
oh, you blow me away with your gets. Like, oh yeah, I just got Sony Manzano. Like, are you kidding me? Yeah, I'm in contact with the Fred Rogers organization. Like, what? Bob, this is incredible. This is amazing.
But it's all about, I always try to one-up myself. Like, I always try to shock myself. Like, what am I interested in? What can I do? Even if the fan base isn't interested, what can I make them interested in? What can I make them go, oh, I never thought of it like that? How can I shift their idea? How can I make them think differently about whatever I'm talking about?
Yeah, and you have the benefit of you have an audience that's been with you for 10 or 11 years, and even if it's not where they think the show should go, they trust you enough to be able to be like, oh, okay, I'm going to listen to this Cam Garrity guy and give him a chance, even though I've never heard of him or his puppet show.
He's so weird.
He's the worst. Oh my gosh.
And on that note, like, if I can sort of go on my soapbox for a second.
Soap away.
I hate being labeled as the kid show guy.
Yeah.
Yes, that is a lot of my content. Yes, that's what people know me for. But is it all of what I do? No. And when I say kids content, I specifically mean preschool.
Yeah.
Because you could look at something like The Cat in the Hat and be like, oh, that's a kids movie. But it clearly is not.
Or even like I don't know how much you've covered this before, but like a Phineas and Ferb is like a, you know, a perfectly serviceable show for a kid to watch. But like, you know, my mom and I will watch that every once in a while because it's brilliant.
Love that show. And even something as oddball as the Rosie O'Donnell show.
Mm-hmm.
She would have like B. Arthur on, and then the commercial break, and then Elmo the next minute. So it's like, I was soaking in all of this. She made it completely accessible for an adult to watch it, and she made it accessible for. She made sure the kids were taken care of. So it makes sense that I would gravitate towards that.
So as we start to wrap up, I
don't want to go yet. This is fun.
We'll call it part 1.
Out of 10.
We want to know kind of how we can help, and it's in the spirit of giving people a chance to maybe make your life easier after they hear this conversation. What's something about your life that you think if other people knew, that either your day-to-day experiences or your experience of creating your podcast would be easier? And not like, you know, super like, oh, they don't know that I'm not a millionaire, so they gave you $1 million and that would make everything easier. But like, what's something that would just like make it just that 10% like, oh, this doesn't have to bother me or wear at me anymore?
I just want them to realize that I'm more than what they think.
Yeah. I'm
sick of having to respond to emails about this Sprout kids show that I don't even know about. Stop assuming.
Stop assuming, I think, is good advice for just literally anybody.
Just because someone is in a wheelchair, a straight up object, doesn't like tell you their intellectual capabilities. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. like
yeah, no, it's
really one size doesn't fit all.
Not even a little bit. And it's so hard when, unfortunately, not seeing it in someone's day-to-day life gives them more, I don't want to say more of an excuse, but it's easier for them to stereotype or to like because they just mentally create a shorthand of like, oh, the last time I saw someone in a wheelchair, they
enjoyed this, or
right, or they didn't have these abilities, or they were limited in this way. So now when I meet Bob, you know, I'm gonna approach them the same way, and it's like, no, you wouldn't do that for any other person.
How do you talk to other people? How would you talk to someone in a wheelchair that was a speaker, that was at a presentation? One size doesn't fit all. Seriously.
Yeah. What do you think people who are producing pop culture today need to be focusing more on throughout their entire creative process? Is it just, you know, one size doesn't fit all, or do you think there's a broader thing they need to have on their mind?
Listen.
Yeah.
Listen to others. You may have a powerful writing staff that knows everything under the sun, but you don't know all of it. So get outside resources and do more to educate yourself. Because if you do that, you could do stuff like the way Stanley impacted me. Because they took the extra care. Don't play it safe. Just because you think you know something, doesn't mean you know all of it. If I could change the perspective of one person, like, I'm not telling them to go into a writer's room and change the script immediately after we talk. But at least, if I'm a thought in their mind, if our little conversation we had was meaningful to them in any way, shape, or form, then great. I've done my part.
Absolutely. And after 11 years, I think there's a lot of people out there who have you on their mind. It's really amazing what you've been able to accomplish. Putting it out there, dream guest for the DJ Bob Show. Who do you got?
Okay. I'm going to say to you, Steven Chbosky. Most recently, he directed the Dear Evan Hansen movie, and before that, then he did Wonder, and then before that, he did a movie that is the reason why I'm still blabbering on, and that is The Perks of Being Wallflower. Love the movie, love the book, want to talk to him, want to pick his brain, want to talk to him about adapting Rent for the screen. He wrote the screenplay for the film adaptation of Rent. He's just such, and I feel like after he did Wonder, he promises to cast at least one person with a disability in one of his movies from now on.
No, from everything you've told me about him, he's just such a thoughtful, creative thinker who just has the right way of viewing the creative process in 2021.
I just want to tell him thank you.
Yeah.
For, like, there's a difference between I watch you as a kid, thank you for being part of it, but thank you for shifting my focus. Thank you for changing my life. Thank you for being the reason why I'm still here.
Yeah. Well, and not to make it too selfish on my end, but that's part of the reason I'm doing this show right now is, and why it's called This Should Have Been a Phone Call, is so many of the people I have on, I'm not asking to talk to President Obama or Bruce Springsteen necessarily. I mean, if they're available, please feel free to reach out. But I just want to talk to the people who I love and who've made my life and experiences better and easier, and to say thank you and to learn more about them. And I think that's just such an important, that's what's missing in so much of what is out there today, is just like hearing these heart-to-heart conversations.
I mean, I would want to do that. I would want to do that with lots of people.
Yeah.
But him, I might break down and cry.
I think I might break down and cry for you, and certainly listening to it would just be out of this world.
Because it's not someone. I'm a fan of him. I love his work.
Mm-hmm.
But you know that there's an added component to it that is just like, I watched your movie when I was in a dark place and I felt this and I want to tell him thank you. I just want to talk to him about everything that he's done.
Well, I have a good feeling that one of these days, one of those projects you're putting in the work in every sense of the word, and I think that could happen for you. How could he, or how could anybody else out there learn more about you and more about the DJ Bob Show?
the best way to find me is go to djbobshow.com, and all our social media links are there. I'm around. You can find me.
Bob, one last thing.
Ooh.
Our real life phone calls that we do mean more to me than you could ever know. I think your voice is a gift, and please never stop.
Well, that means a lot, because you know that I've been through a lot. Knowing that I have your calls to look forward to
whenever I'm walking the dogs,
it gives me something to look forward to. It's not just a phone call to me. And I never thought that you and I would become this close. So, thanks for that.
Well, I love you, man.
Love you too.
We did it. You came to the end of another episode of This Should Have Been a Phone Call. So much thanks to Bob Runkel for stopping by and having such a wonderful conversation with me. If this is your first time listening, there are plenty of other episodes of the show. Just go to phonecallpod.com and you could listen to all of them right now. Please give us a follow at phonecallpod wherever you get your social media. And if you're feeling brave, I always appreciate a good review or comment over at Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. It helps the show grow, but it also ensures that the pizza gets delivered in 30 minutes or less. So I definitely appreciate that. We'll see you next time on This Should Have Been a Phone Call. Oh, and one more thing. I love you. You are enough. Keep going.